Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex sources, articles, research papers, field notes, extract the gold, and hand you the key.
And today, the key is the topic.
It really is. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's get into it. We are doing a deep dive on an object that isn't just an artifact, it's the ultimate key to a forgotten world. We're talking about the Rosetta Stone.
It's hard to overstate its importance. I mean, before this one piece of stone was found, you had over 1,400 years of Egyptian history just locked away.
A total black box.
Completely.
Yep.
All of that amazing culture, the literature, the dynasties, the pharaohs, the Ptolemaic period, it was all behind a script that nobody on Earth could read. It was like a library had been sealed shut for a millennium and a half.
And our mission today is to trace that incredible journey. We're going to start with its original purpose, which was actually pretty mundane, a political decree in 1996 BC.
Yeah, just politics.
Then we'll follow its rediscovery, which was, incredibly dramatic, found by Napoleon's army in 1799.
The total accident of war.
Exactly. And then we'll get into the intellectual battle to decipher it. And finally, its complicated modern legacy, the repatriation debates, and how it's become this global metaphor.
And this is so crucial for you, the learner. Because the story of the Rosetta Stone is really the story of knowledge recovery. It shows how one sort of fragmented piece of evidence can just completely change our entire understanding of the ancient world. It basically resurrected a civilization from silence.
It's this perfect storm of, archaeology, human intellect, and a healthy dose of rivalry.
A lot of rivalry, yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the object itself. When you picture the Rosetta Stone, you think of this huge, black, imposing slab in the British Museum. But the reality is a little different, isn't it?
It is. That image of a solid black stone is actually a long-standing misconception.
Really?
Yeah. For most of its time in London, the curators, they would rub white chalk into the inscriptions to make them easier for visitors to read.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they also coated the whole thing in a layer of carnauba wax to protect it. So that combination gave it that dark, uniform, waxy look, which led everyone to think it was black basalt.
But that's not what it's made of at all.
Not at all. In 1999, they did this huge cleaning project. They stripped all those layers away, and underneath, they found its true nature. It's a steel of dark gray granodiorite.
Granodiorite, what is that exactly?
It's a much harder, more crystalline rock. The cleaning revealed this sort of sparkle in its texture. And most importantly, it showed this really distinct pink vein running across the top left corner.
And that pink vein is a clue.
It's the geological fingerprint. That specific coloration is characteristic of rock from the quarries at Gebel Tingar, which is near Aswan in southern Egypt. So we know exactly where the stone came from.
And it certainly wasn't small. I mean, the numbers are staggering. It's 112.3 centimeters high.
Almost 4 feet tall.
And it weighs around 760 kilograms. That's what, nearly 1,700 pounds?
Yeah, this was meant to be a permanent, very public monument. You don't carve something that heavy for a temporary notice.
And that's just a fragment.
Right. And that's the thing. What we have is only a piece of the original. We know from comparing it to other similar stelae from that period, like the Decree of Canopus, that the original was probably much taller.
How much tall?
Estimates put it closer to 149 centimeters, so almost 5 feet high. It would have had a rounded top of lunette, which almost certainly would have had a carved scene on it.
The scene of what?
Probably King Ptolemy V being presented to the Egyptian gods with a winged disc symbol above them. The piece we have is just the bottom 2/3 of that original monument.
And the damage is just,
Yeah.
it's so unfortunate, especially where the most important text was.
It's the great irony of the whole thing. The top section, which had the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the sacred language of the gods, is the most heavily damaged part.
How much is left?
We only had the last 14 lines.
Yeah.
Every single one of them is broken on the right side, and some on the left as well. It's a mess.
So the most mysterious script is the most incomplete.
Exactly. The middle text, the Demotic script, is actually the best preserved. We have 32 lines of that. And then the bottom text, the ancient Greek, which was the one they could already read, is mostly intact until it breaks off at the corner.
So we have this incredible object with 3 different scripts on it.
A trifecta, yeah. At the very top, you have the formal hieroglyphs, written in this sort of archaic style to give it religious weight. In the middle, you have Demotic. That was the everyday cursive script used for administrative documents. It was the language people actually used.
The language of documents, I think I read.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, of course, ancient Greek.
Yeah.
That was the language of the government. of the ruling Ptolemaic dynasty.
And the absolute genius of it, or maybe just the spectacular luck, was that the text itself says that all three inscriptions are versions of the same decree.
That was the light bulb moment. That's what Lieutenant Bouchard and the French savants realized almost immediately. It wasn't just three random texts. It was a key. It made the stone this indispensable comparative text. It was the only way to figure out the unknown scripts, using the known one as a guide.
Okay, so let's get into the context of that decree. Why was this thing even made in the first place? Back in 1996 BC. It was issued for King Ptolemy V Epiphanes, and it sounds like his kingdom was not in a great place.
Not at all. Instability is the defining word for that era. Ptolemy V was officially crowned when he was 12.
12 years old.
But he had technically been king since he was 5, after his parents died very suddenly and very suspiciously.
Assassinated.
It's widely believed they were murdered in a palace coup by the king's mistress, Agathoclea, and her brother.
So you have a child king and a bunch of powerful, scheming regents running the show. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was total chaos.
Yeah.
For years, the kingdom was run by this succession of warring guardians who were mostly interested in their own power.
And I'm guessing their rivals on the outside saw this weakness and pounced.
Immediately. The big threat came from the north. The Seleucid Emperor Antiochus III and Philip V of Macedon basically made a pact to carve up Egypt's overseas territories.
So the empire was shrinking.
It was hemorrhaging territory. And at the same time, there was an even bigger problem at home.
The revolt in the south.
Yes, a massive long-running revolt in Upper Egypt. The southern part of the country was an open rebellion against the Greek rulers.
Yeah.
I mean, the instability was existential.
So this decree, issued in March of 96 BC, it wasn't really a celebration, it was more like a political transaction.
It was a desperate attempt to buy stability and legitimacy. And it's so telling that the Congress of Priests who issued it met in Memphis, not the Ptolemaic capital of Alexandria.
What's the significance of that?
Well, by going to Memphis, the ancient spiritual heart of Egypt, the rulers were signaling how much they needed the support of the Egyptian priesthood. These priests had immense influence. If they endorsed Ptolemy V, it would help bridge that legitimacy gap, the fact that he was a Greek ruling over Egyptians.
So what was the deal exactly? What did the priests get for their support?
It's a classic quid pro quo. The priests pledged to establish a divine cult for the young king, to celebrate him every year. And in return, Ptolemy V gave them huge gifts of silver and grain, canceled debts, handed out tax exemptions, anything to solidify their power and buy their loyalty.
And he also made a point of mentioning his public works to show he was a good king for the common people.
He did, and it's remarkably specific. The decree talks about this one unusually high Nile flood.
Yeah.
And Ptolemy claims he personally directed the damming of the excess water to protect the farmers.
A bit of political PR.
Classic PR. It was a tangible benefit that people would understand. The message was clear. This king, backed by the priests and the gods, protects your livelihood.
It's just so interesting how these foreign rulers had to constantly use these multilingual decrees to communicate. This wasn't a one-time thing.
Not at all. It was standard practice for the Ptolemies. We know there were other copies of this exact decree, and it was part of a whole series of similar decrees issued by earlier kings.
So this object that unlocked all of ancient history was, at its heart, just a piece of government propaganda.
A mandatory government announcement, yeah. An eternal key hidden in a temporary political crisis.
And it lay buried for almost 2,000 years until another war brought it back into the light.
Right. We fast forward to 1799. Napoleon invades Egypt.
And this wasn't just a military campaign. Napoleon was smart. He brought 151 scientists and technical experts with him, the savants.
He was trying to conquer Egypt intellectually as well as militarily, and the discovery itself was just this incredible accident.
So what happened?
It's July 1799. French soldiers are reinforcing this old Ottoman fort near the town of Rashid, which they called Rosetta. They were tearing down an old wall to build new defenses.
And a soldier just spots it in the rubble.
Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard sees this big, dark slab with writing on it being pulled out of the demolition. And he knew right away it was something special.
Because of the 3 scripts.
Exactly. He realized it was probably 3 versions of the same text. So the stone gets sent down to Cairo, and the news spreads like wildfire through the French scientific community there.
And they figured out what they had pretty quickly.
Amazingly quickly. Jean-Joseph Marcel, a printer, was the first to correctly identify the middle text as Demotic, which was a huge step.
But now they have this single, massive, heavy object. The challenge must have been, how do we share this with scholars back in Europe?
That was the next big problem. So in 1800, a few of the French experts came up with some really clever ways to make copies. One of them, Nicolas Jacques-Conté, actually figured out how to use the stone itself as a printing block.
Like a giant stamp.
Pretty much. They'd ink the stone and press paper onto it. And those prints were vital. They were rushed back to Paris so scholars could start working on it long before the stone itself ever left Egypt.
Which was good thinking, because the French weren't going to hold on to it for long.
No. The British landed in 1801, defeated the French, and laid siege to Alexandria.
And the stone was in Alexandria with the French commander, General Menou.
Right. And when Menou was forced to surrender, the stone became this huge point of contention.
This is where the ownership dispute kicks off.
It gets incredibly tense. Menou actually tried to claim the Rosetta Stone as his personal private property to keep it from being surrendered.
You're kidding?
Nope. He argued it wasn't a military or state artifact. But the British were determined. The scholars of the British Army, like Edward Daniel Clarke, were absolutely adamant that it belonged to the British Crown.
So the academics were driving the conflict.
They were at the heart of it. And this led to this incredibly dramatic moment. The French scholars, furious at the idea of handing over their discoveries, basically threatened to burn everything.
Darn it all.
They said they'd rather throw it all into the sea than surrender it to the English, invoking the destruction of the Library of Alexandria.
Wow. So history itself was the bargaining chip.
It was. Eventually, a compromise was reached, and all the antiquities, including the stone, were handed over to the British.
And the story of the actual handover is a bit theatrical itself. There are a couple of different versions, right?
There are. Colonel Turner, the British officer in charge, claimed he just marched in and seized it from Menou. But the more interesting account is from Clarke, the scholar. He said he was secretly led by a French officer who apparently didn't like Menou where the stone was hidden.
Hidden where?
Under some carpets, mixed in with Menou's personal baggage in the back streets of Alexandria. So they grabbed it, put it on a captured French ship, and sent it to England.
And its public life in Britain began almost the second it landed.
Immediately. It arrived in Portsmouth in February 1802. It was presented to King George III, who directed it be placed in the British Museum. But first, it was shown to the scholars at the Society of Antiquaries of London.
And they made copies right away.
That was the priority.
Yeah.
They made 4 high-quality plaster casts and sent them to Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, and Dublin. And prints were sent all over Europe. They knew this had to be an international effort.
When it finally got to the British Museum, they made its origins very clear.
Oh, yeah. They painted inscriptions right on the side of it in white paint. Captured in Egypt by the British Army in 1801 and presented by King George III.
Not subtle.
Not at all. And it's been on display pretty much continuously ever since. It's the museum's single most visited object.
It's so important that they've even moved it for safety.
Only once, really. During World War I in 1917, there was a real fear of German bombing raids over London. So they moved the stone 50 feet underground into an unused station of the Postal Tube Railway.
Incredible. Just to keep it safe.
For 2 years. A testament to its value.
Okay, so this brings us to the intellectual heart of the story. Reading the unreadable. Before the stone, Egyptian history was just silent. How did that happen? How does a whole civilization's writing system just vanish?
It was a slow death, really, driven by cultural and religious shifts in the late Roman Empire. The last known hieroglyphic inscription is dated to 394 AD.
That's it, the end of the line.
That's the end. As Christianity spread, the old Egyptian religious practices, which were completely tied to the hieroglyphs, were suppressed. The temples were closed, and the script lost its reason for being.
So the culture that supported the script disappeared.
Exactly. The language evolved into Coptic, which used the Greek alphabet. And for the next 1,000 years, all these misleading ideas about what hieroglyphs were took hold.
You're talking about Horapollo.
He's the main culprit. His book, Hieroglyphica, argued that the symbols were purely allegorical. You know, a picture of a goose meant son because geese are loving parents, that kind of thing.
So everyone thought it was a picture language, not a sound language.
Exactly. And that one idea blocked any real progress for centuries until the Rosetta Stone provided the proof they needed.
So the stone arrives. Step 1 is the Greek text.
Right. That's the starting point. It's the known quantity. Scholars like Stephen Weston in England and Hubert Pascal Amélian in France quickly produced translations. They knew what the decree said.
So once they have the meaning, they can attack the other scripts. And they start with the middle one, Demotic.
That was step 2. A Swedish scholar, Johann Åkerblad, and the French Orientalist Sylvestre de Sacy had a brilliant idea.
Which was?
Use the proper names. They took the foreign names from the Greek text, Ptolemaios, Alexandros, and looked for similar-looking groups of symbols in the Demotic text.
Because names have to be spelled out phonetically.
Exactly. And it worked, to a point. Åkerblad managed to identify about half of the Demotic alphabet correctly. It was a huge first step.
But they got stuck.
But they did, because they made a wrong assumption. They thought the entire script must be purely alphabetic. They didn't understand that Egyptian writing is a hybrid. It uses phonetic signs and ideograms, which are signs that represent whole words or ideas.
Which is where Thomas Young comes in, step 3.
Right. Thomas Young, this brilliant British polymath, he decided to focus on the hieroglyphs, specifically the ovals, the cartouches.
The theory being that cartouches always contained royal names.
Exactly. So he took the one name he knew was there, Ptolemy, and he managed to isolate the phonetic signs for P, T, O, L, M, and S. It was a massive breakthrough. He proved hieroglyphs had a phonetic component.
But he got stuck too, for a similar reason.
A very similar reason. Young assumed that phonetic spelling was only used for foreign names, like the Greek Ptolemies. He thought that for native Egyptian words, the script went back to being purely symbolic, like Apollo said.
So he could read the name of the ruler, but he couldn't read what the ruler was actually doing.
Precisely. He had a key, but he thought it only opened one very specific lock.
And that sets the stage for the final breakthrough, Jean-François Champollion.
Champollion. He was obsessed with Egypt and was fluent in Coptic, which he was convinced was the descendant of the ancient language. He knew Young's work, but the final piece of the puzzle came from another artifact.
The Philae obelisk.
Right. It had another bilingual inscription, this time with the names Ptolemaeus and Cleopatra.
Having a second name was the key.
It was everything. Because he could cross-reference the letters. The P and the T and the L appeared in both names, so he could confirm their sounds and quickly build out a whole alphabet. He announced it in 1822.
But the real eureka moment, the thing that unlocked everything, wasn't a Greek name, was it?
No, and this is the crucial distinction. In 1823, he got copies of cartouches from much older temples with the names of native pharaohs, and he was able to sound out the names Rameses and Thutmose.
Wow.
And that was it. That proved that the phonetic system wasn't just for foreigners. It was used for native Egyptian names from 1,000 years before the Greeks. It shattered Young's assumption.
And the entire 1,400 years of silence just ended.
The floodgates opened. Because he knew Coptic, he could start to reconstruct the grammar and the vocabulary. He had cracked the entire system.
Of course, this incredible intellectual race was not always friendly. There was a lot of rivalry.
Oh, a huge amount.
Yeah.
The British accused Champollion of plagiarizing Young's initial work. It was a very nasty nationalistic fight that went on for decades.
And there was even scandal inside the French camp.
The Salvolini affair. One of Champollion's own students basically stole his notes after he died and tried to pass the work off as his own. It was a cutthroat world.
So even with the code cracked, the work wasn't done. It took decades to refine the translations.
The initial decipherment was just the framework.
Yeah.
It took until the 1850s for scholars to produce really reliable revised translations. And there's still debate today about which of the three texts was the original.
The source code, so to speak.
Right. Was it written in Greek first and then translated, or did it start with the sacred hieroglyphs? The most likely answer is that it was all drafted at the same time by a committee, blending the three traditions together.
Which makes sense. It feels like a document created by a committee.
It really does.
The Rosetta Stone is now probably the most famous rock in the world. It's so famous that its name has become part of our language.
It's a huge cultural achievement. The term Rosetta Stone now just means the key to cracking any kind of code, the one clue that lets you understand a much bigger system.
And you see that metaphor everywhere.
Everywhere. In physics, the spectrum of the hydrogen atom is called the Rosetta Stone of modern physics, because understanding it allowed us to understand all other atoms.
And in biology, too.
Yeah, a little plant called Arabidopsis is the Rosetta Stone of flowering time, because its simple genetics provided the key to how all flowers work. Even the European Space Agency named their comet-chasing probe Rosetta.
Because they hoped the comet would hold the key to the origins of the solar system.
Exactly. The metaphor is perfect.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, as a concept, it's not totally unique. There have been other bilingual texts that have unlocked languages.
That's a great point. The Rosetta Stone is the most famous, But the Behistun inscription in Iran did the same thing for cuneiform scripts, which was just as important for Mesopotamian history.
So it's part of a larger story of decipherment.
It is a very important part.
But that brings us to its complicated modern life and the calls for its repatriation.
Yes. This has been a consistent call since the early 2000s, led by Dr. Zahi Hawass in Egypt. He's called it the icon of our Egyptian identity and argued that it belongs in Egypt.
And he's proposed compromises, right? Not just demanding it back permanently.
He has. He's asked for temporary loans, for example, for the opening of the new Grand Egyptian Museum. The British Museum did give Egypt a full-size replica, but the original has stayed in London.
And what is the position of the British Museum and other big international museums?
They have a unified defense. They argue that these objects were acquired in a different era with different values, and that now they serve as world objects in world museums.
The argument being that more people can see it in London, that it belongs to humanity.
That's the core of their position, that they serve the people of every nation by making these treasures of global heritage accessible. It's a really complex debate with no easy answers.
A clash between national identity and global access.
And it leads to this great little irony that the scholar John Ray pointed out.
What's up?
He noted that the day is coming when the Rosetta Stone will have spent more time in the British Museum than it ever did in Rosetta or anywhere else in ancient Egypt. Its modern life as an icon has now completely eclipsed its original purpose.
So when you boil it all down, what does this all mean? We've traced this journey from a piece of rock made for a nervous teenage king all the way to the tool that brought a civilization back to life. The deep dive really shows that the genius wasn't just finding the stone. It was the incredible intellectual effort that followed. That moment of realizing that a single name, Ptolemaios, held the phonetic key to unlock everything else.
That one connection was the thread that unraveled the whole mystery. It gave us back a millennium of history.
And proved that even the most difficult codes can be broken if you just find the right key.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the final thought to leave you with is this. That original decree was made for one reason, and one reason only: to secure the power of King Ptolemy V. It was pure political propaganda, designed for immediate local relevance in a very turbulent time.
Meant to glorify one king.
For a fleeting moment. But consider the incredible irony. This routine political document designed to solve a short-term crisis instead became the eternal key to understanding the entire religious and historical world of the very civilization it was meant to govern. This object, intended to elevate a single king's cult, ended up resurrecting an entire ancient world.